Paso a Paso podcast.
Welcome back to the Paso Paso podcast. My name is Miles. Thanks for joining us today. On this episode, we will review a recent event. It was held online and hosted by myself, led and initiated by Save the Children of New Mexico. Features a lot of legislators reflecting on the positive outcomes of this session, and we hope you find it informative and interesting. For more information, visit pasotaos.org. Here we go.
My name is Lacey Daniel Miller. For those of you that don't know me, I see a lot of new faces and names here. I am the state manager for Save the Children Action Network here in New Mexico. And I think we have quite a few folks joining us tonight. So folks, I just want to encourage you, if you're interested, if you want to change your view, if you're in the gallery view, the speaker view might be a little bit better. So there's a little button up on mine. It's on the top right that says view, and you can change to speaker view. And I just wanted to share a little bit about Save the Children Action Network. For those of you who don't know, we're the political voice for kids, and we've been advocating here in New Mexico for a little over 2 years now. And we advocate for early childhood education, among other issues, and we do that with our grassroots network of supporters. We have supporters around the state, and we have volunteer teams in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Las Cruces. If you want to get involved, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat box for you to reach out and definitely take what you learn at this event and help us advocate down the road. And now I'm going to pass it on to Miles, and we'll get started with our program.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm glad to be part of this evening. My name is Miles Bonney, based in Taos with the Paso Early Childhood Provider Network here. And I also host the podcast where we cover this issue regionally and statewide. If you all are into podcasts, check out Paso or Paso Taos. We have a wonderful panel tonight and some great questions. And if you have some questions, feel free to add them in the chat as we go along, and Lacey will help me monitor that. If it's all right, Lacey, maybe we'll jump into some of our introductions of our panelists now. Wonderful. Well, I'm very excited again to be here. Statewide is always very exciting, especially here in New Mexico. So getting started, Secretary Elizabeth Groginski is here, and she is the leader of the New Mexico's new Early Childhood Education and Care Department, as you know. Prior to leading the ECECD, she was the Assistant Superintendent of Early Learning in Washington, D.C., and directed the Early Childhood Education area of the United Way, and served as Director of Colorado's Head Start Collaboration Office as well. In addition, Claire Dudley Chavez is here. She's the Director of Policy, Research, and Quality Initiatives at the New Mexico Early Childhood Education and Care Department. She's been an early childhood advocate for many years, previously serving as an early education advisor to Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller and in early childhood policy at United Way of Santa Fe. Alan Sanchez is here as well. He's the president of CHI, St. Joseph's Children, the largest home visiting nonprofit in New Mexico, and the executive director of New Mexico Conference of Bishops. He is the leader of Invest in Kids Now, a coalition advocating since 2010 to invest a tiny portion of our state's commonwealth, the Land Grant Permanent Fund, into high-quality early childhood programs. It was at this point that Save the Children of New Mexico awarded and recognized some of our wonderful legislators in our state who did so much great work this session. After that, I was provided some questions for the panelists, and it was even more fun to hear what their answers were. Hope you enjoy this. All right, well, on to the questions. We have some here, and there'll be more to come. For Majority Whip Gallegos, what inspired you to advocate for early childhood and push for the development of a state trust fund dedicated solely to young children?
Well, thank you for the question. You know, I don't know if you all know this, but I've been a social worker for over 25 years. And for a majority of that time, I've worked in child welfare and child advocacy. And during that time, I've seen lots of broken bones, lots of broken spirits, with these kiddos, and being in that environment for so long, you have to look for the good, and just really wanting to make sure that children were safe, that they were developing properly, and that the grassroots programs were really going into homes and being able to assess children's safety, that they were able to assess early diagnosis in case for sometimes hearing, sometimes visual problems, developmental delays. There's just so many building blocks. And so, early childhood is we've been working at fine tuning it for so long. And this was just another piece of the puzzle that really came about with this Early Childhood Trust Fund. And I think Representative Martinez said it best, there were so many building blocks that really put it all together. And with the secretary at the helm right now, our children's future is really bright. And so just to be able to be a part of that and making sure that children are on the right path from the very beginning. And so that was so important to me. And it's been my life's work. And so this type of recognition and just the group of people that I was able to work with on this just means so much to me.
Thank you so much. All right, next question is for Alan, Mr. Alan Sanchez. Turning to HJR 1, the Constitutional Amendment for Early Childhood, what did it take to get this proposal passed after more than a decade of trying? And what will it mean for New Mexico families if it is approved by voters come November of next year?
Thank you for the question. The first time they sent the question to me, it's after 10 years, like you said, after a decade, why did it pass this year? Because there were 10 years of advocacy. And when we look at what size and what potential and what good, a lot of good is going to come from this if we get it passed, was motivated people. But it took a coalition. We had to do a number of levels of educating 10 years ago. Now, when we first introduced this, we weren't 50th in children's well-being. We were 44th at the time. But the trend was moving. We were moving that way. And then, as we know, a few years ago, we went to 50th. But we had to first educate the public and the legislators about the condition of the children. It's like when I live by a train, a train track, and you get so used to that noise that you don't realize, the status quo just becomes normal. We had to educate the people and the legislators about the condition of our children. Once they accepted that condition, then we had to move in to educate the public and the legislators that the mitigator to the toxic stress were these high quality programs. And once we were able to get people to start seeing the programs are good, the programs work, the high quality, that's going to make the whole difference, then we push more and more about the money. But the Constitutional Amendment for Early Childhood is not just about where you get the money, but it was a social justice issue because of the institutional racism that started that trust in 1910. Properties that were taken from people of New Mexico, these young children didn't have access to that intergenerational wealth that was taken from them. So it's a social justice issue that we work toward this. But it was like setting up dominoes. And I know Javier Martinez likes to embarrass me, and thank you, Javier, for your kind words. But I don't see those dark times when it failed or when we didn't get a hearing or there's obstacles. Actually, that's when new life was being breathed into it each time. And so it was a dominoes, and then the domino effect took place. I have to just tell you, like one night when we thought we're going to lose, and it was important to win in the House because every time the House won, it breathed new life into it for another year. Every year, it just grew greater and greater. That this chamber got it, and they have wise people, and they had appropriations there to it, and we would pass. But we didn't think one night that we were going to pass off the floor. We weren't sure. Mo and Javier were sweating it, and this one man made a huge sacrifice. Former Representative Jim Trujillo, and he came off his sick bed. He hadn't been in the legislature. He was recovering from triple bypass, and he surprised everybody. And he came. It was like a movie. When they make the story, this is going to be beautiful. And now his double doors swung open. There was Jim standing there, with the angel of death standing behind him. He was running from the angel of death. And they called the vote. He pushed the button. Everybody looked at the screen. And when the count came in, he looked down and Jim was gone. But Jim came and breathed new life into it. And each year, new life was breathed into it. Why? Because it's all about the little guys. Now, I know the truth is hard to accept, but sometimes we want to defend the truth. And people think, Alan, you got a little rough and you got a little too tough with some of the legislators and people. And no, the truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. You just have to turn it loose. and it defends itself. Kind of like with our project, when we did the parody on New Mexico Truth, but it was an education. For instance, I was happy to see Baji there when we brought the Wonder of Learning to New Mexico. All these layers of education, that there was a need for the children, that there's a mitigator to the toxic stress, that it's the programs, and now they are worth funding. And this is what now in 2021, our legislators and our public got it. And the legislators got it only because the public got it. And the polls have shown it's strong. So not like 2003, where that constitutional amendment wasn't for early childhood. They had a few months to campaign. We've been campaigning for 10 years, and the public have bought in, and the polls are at 78%. So when they get to vote for this, people are going to use their right, and they're going to make it happen, and the future is going to be bright. And the epidemic of toxic stress is going to go away, and New Mexico will be changed forever because there's a sustainable funding source.
Wow. Well, thank you. Incredible. Appreciate it. I mean, it's also, obviously you're the right person for the job there. Really appreciate the stories as well that we hadn't heard, for those that weren't present of those sessions. I didn't know that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, you were speaking of Mr. Martinez as well. Chair Martinez, what motivated you to continue pushing for the constitutional amendment for early childhood each year?
As I stated earlier, I think it was really the advocacy community, the Investing Kids Now Coalition, which CHI St. Joseph's and Alan and Jessa Cowdery helped lead, along with several other partners, including Voices and Olay and Save the Children and so many others. But also, the families that I get to work with on a daily basis, I get to work with families who left their homeland with nothing but the clothes on their back because they want a better future for their children. And if they are willing to make that sacrifice, if they're willing to cross through rivers and mountains and deserts, deal with traffickers and all the bad people, if they are willing to deal with the risk of getting arrested by ICE and thrown in a cage just because they want a better future for their kids, putting up with some salty legislators every year in the legislature, it pales in comparison with that other sacrifice. So, really it's people wanting that better future and us having the opportunity as a state to correct 500 plus years of racism and oppression by redistributing this massive fund that, hey, if you're in the financial investment world, that's a nice contract to have if you're the dude investing that money in Wall Street. But what about our kids? Our kids are dying on the vine, right? We know that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know. And it's only gotten worse during this pandemic. We just haven't really heard the whole story yet, unfortunately, but we will one day soon. And I'm so glad that we've got this dedicated fund. We've got this early childhood and care department with the leadership of Secretary Gerginski and her team. And we're going to do this right. We have to do it right. So, that's really what motivated me over the years. Back to Alan's point about Chairman Trujillo, I was just looking up the year. So it was the 2017 session. If you get a chance, go to the webcast. This is archived. You all can see this. I couldn't agree more with Alan. It was out of a movie. And again, props to the leadership, because that was something that the leadership, Doreen and Cheryl and Brian Egoff and Rena, they all orchestrated this behind the scenes. We didn't know till the very last minute. Like, we didn't really know. We thought maybe Jim might come in and take the vote, but we weren't so sure because he had just gone through a crazy surgical procedure. And sure enough, he walks in. I'll never forget, he was wearing an Albuquerque Dukes baseball cap. We had to suspend the rules to allow him to roll in without a suit and tie and a baseball cap, which we did. And he came in right when they announced the vote. And you see the Republicans scrambling because all of a sudden they knew, they thought they had us, right? Because we needed that 37th vote. You need 37 votes to pass a constitutional amendment, right? We had 36 without Jim. Jim walked in, literally rolled in actually in a wheelchair, took the vote. By the time the media came down to interview, he was gone. We couldn't even say thank you. He was gone. I didn't see him for another year to the next session. That night might be the night that actually saved this movement.
And I'm imagining there were no cameras present at the time. The legend lives on.
Well, there is webcasts. So you can actually, you can't really see Jim, but you can just see everything stopping and everybody clapping.
Wow.
And then Jim leaves. But nobody saw him. No camera.
Thank you.